Hello everybody and welcome back to Odin's Movie Blog. I am the critic who is a cynic. Hope you're doing well. Today we're talking about some box office numbers here on the Odin's Movie Blog channel. And I want to give a huge shout out to Joe Weaver over at Geeks and Gamers who put this graphic together of all the box office for all the Star Wars films, all the trilogies as they currently stand, including all of the new Star Wars films as well. And it all plays into the recent news that came out that apparently we're a bunch of Russian spies. We're a bunch of Russian political operatives, political bots, Russian bots. Welcome to Mother Russia. We are all bots here together. Please raise your vodka. But yeah, so this whole thing that came out, Rian Johnson retweeted it, is now continued on with this narrative, continued on with this utter nonsense, and it's ignored the actual facts. It's ignored the actual reality of who the fans actually are, how the fans feel, and the effect that Rian Johnson and Disney Star Wars has had on the overall Disney franchise. It's very important. It is very, very important for us to understand that and to understand exactly where it's gone, where it's going, and also where it's come from as well, because we need to understand our past to be able to understand our future. And also when you look at these numbers, when you see these numbers on the screen in front of you, you will see that it's not looking good, that the health of Star Wars is not very high at this point. But also, there's a little bit more of a conspiracy going on than a lot of people might say. It's not the Russians that are part of any kind of cover. It's not the Russians who are any part of infiltration. It's actually more of the SJWism that's actually infiltrating not only the movies, but also review sites as well, because Joe also shouted out to me and let me know that Rotten Tomatoes is doing some pretty sketchy stuff when it comes to Last Jedi. But let's look at the box office numbers first. So as you see, original trilogy, again, this is all adjusted for inflation. The first Star Wars film, A New Hope, in 1977, adjusted for inflation, made $2.74 billion. Now, of course, you might say, oh, well, then it dropped to $1.66 billion, and then it dropped to $1.32 billion. Oh, why is it dropping? Why is it not doing very well? Well, there's a lot of different factors that it go into. Obviously, the hype being one of them, being available in certain markets, certain years, and not in other years. That is also a huge part of it as well. And so when we take those things into account, we see overall it did very well. I mean, 2.7 to 1.6 to 1.3. I mean, we're looking there at, about $5.6 billion for that original trilogy. You go ahead to the prequel trilogy, not nearly as well. I mean, $1.79 billion, so better than episode 5. So again, episode 6. So obviously, there was still a lot of hype around it. Episode 1 did very well, $1.79 billion. Episode 1 wasn't very good. And so we see a drop-off of $1.02 billion. Episode 2 wasn't very good either. However, it was finishing a story. It was finishing something to lead up to and set up for what would have eventually been the prequel, the original trilogy. And so therefore, we saw a little bit of an uptick to $1.21 billion. And so altogether, what you have is around 2.81 plus that. So that's about $4 billion overall. So we went from $5 billion to $4 billion, and now we get to the current state. So the two actual episodes, because this is before we had all these in-between stuff, the two actual episodes themselves, $2.19 billion. So again, respectable for Force Awakens. And I've said this constantly. I've said that Force Awakens on its own, to me, is an okay film. Are there problems? Is Rey still a Mary Sue? Yes, absolutely. However, it does still set up for some very interesting things. Yes, I was so mad that Han Solo had to be killed off before the big three could be together one more time on screen, and we were robbed of that, and that will never, ever happen again in our lifetime. That is true. However, if it had set up for something really cool in episode 8, it could have been worth it. But instead, everything that was set up by episode 7 was just done away with, was just destroyed because of Rian Johnson, and which is why you saw a $1 billion drop between the two films because of that very reason. It's not because it wasn't available in different markets. It's not because people were getting tired of it. It was because the film overall just did not do a very good job. So again, we see $2.19 billion to $1.35 billion. So roughly, a little less than $1 billion loss there. In between that, we have Rogue One, which is the one that was $1.09 billion, and then So Low, which I love how he put so low there because it's true, with a whopping $392 million, making it the first and only Star Wars film not to break $1 billion. Even episode 2, as bad as episode 2 is in my opinion, that film still broke $1 billion. Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, which a lot of people are critical of, still broke $1 billion. Solo, which is a decent film at best in a lot of different ways, couldn't even break that. And so the question is asked, well, how is it that all of these films, the original trilogy, the prequel trilogy, even episode 7, and to a lesser extent episode 8, because obviously 1.3 billion is still making money. But what do you see there? A downward trajectory. Almost every single time you look at this, again, you look to the original trilogy, there's a downward trajectory. Again, there was a lot of other factors that led to that, other than what we see in today's market, because obviously we need to understand that there were different markets back then. It was a lot harder to get into and merge in certain markets that would have been booming for this, that would have loved to have seen these films at the time. But again, we need to understand that going forward. Prequel trilogy, because of the fact that it was kind of a hit and miss and it was kind of a special event, that's the reason why we saw this, uptick going back and forth. But we need to understand this. There's a downward trend when it comes to these films. Again, there's a trend that you can see that the films, after the first film, do not do as well, and the third film usually drops even more than that. So taking all of this into account, taking everything, all the factors in, what do we see? Again, we see about $1 billion drop-off, which means if we see another $1 billion drop-off or something close to that, that means Episode 9 is in danger of making about $350 million. Now, I think it's going to do a little bit better than that. I think at this point it's going to be between $650 and $750 million, but that is still very low. That will still be the second lowest grossing Star Wars film of all time, and it will be the second film to not break $1 billion. And also, if it's going to make around $650 to $750, guess what? That's breaking even. Possibly even losing money, because remember, if it makes that much, it's going to cost over $500 million to make that film when you add in marketing. And also remember, 60% of that money that they make at the box office doesn't go back to Disney. Again, or rather, only 60% of the box office actually goes back to Disney, because that is the way these deals work. Some people will say, "Oh, but Disney's able to get special deals." Okay, at first, yes, but over time they get less and less and less, which is why around overall, especially also foreign markets, they don't get nearly as good of a deal either. That's only the domestic. So overall, when you take everything into account, seeing that most money usually comes from foreign markets, you need to be able to round it to around 60% of the total box office take that any of these films ever really see from the actual gross of the film, which means that if episode 9 makes the same kind of drop, again, we see the trajectory from episode 4, 5, and 6. Again, the prequel trilogy was kind of an anomaly, but even then, that small uptick, it's not likely to happen, because that was the end of something leading up to the birth of Darth Vader. So obviously there was a huge event there, a huge character. There is nothing to look forward to in episode 9. Episode 8 destroyed everything. The Last Jedi destroyed everything and made it to the point where most people aren't interested. Most people don't care about Star Wars anymore. It's not even that people are mad about The Last Jedi. It's come to the point now where this has made people done with Star Wars, tired of Star Wars, and that is a sad state. That is a sad time to be in the part of the fandom because of how poorly they've treated these films. The fact that Solo broke off or stopped at $392 million, that it's going to be a $200 million loss at the box office, is abysmal, is sad. So if you want to talk about, it's my God, well, you see, everybody, I'm Rian Johnson, and I say it was the Russian bots. The Russian bots were the ones, and you see my PhD friend over here, he says that it was the Russian bots, and that's what I think about that. So, I mean, we have, Rian Johnson saying, it's the Russians, everything's being blamed on the Russians, everything, no matter what happens in the world today, the Russians did it, it's all the Russians' fault, that's what it's going to be. No, look at the numbers. Numbers don't lie. Math doesn't lie. And what we see, downward trajectory, abysmal numbers for Solo. And what was the film that came right before that? Episode 8. Episode 8. We see that happen a lot in films. We see the films prior to it usually have an effect on the outcome of the other one. That's the reason why we saw such a huge drop-off, because keep in mind, that's a $700 million difference between Episode 7 and Episode 8. Now, some people say, you could say the same thing between the other films of the original trilogy, but again, there were different factors going on. It wasn't because people were like, I'm done with this. It was because of the different markets. It was because of the fact that it was harder to sell in various markets at that time. Not so much here in the current time period that we're living in. Instead, what we see is it's very different. Instead, it's because of all of this nonsense, all of this political SJWism being thrown into films, Rian Johnson attacking the fans because they don't like it, Rian Johnson, everyone else doubling down, Kathleen Kennedy getting a 3-year contract extension after Solo. Again, Solo, the $392 million, the $200 million loss, that was because of Kathleen Kennedy. She is the sole reason why that film lost as much money as it did, because she is the one that waited until the very end to fire Lord and Miller, who she hired in the first place, to replace them with someone else who wanted to reshoot everything, and that ballooned the budget so much that it's going to end up at a financial loss. So this is what we need to focus on. This is what we need to talk about, instead of, the Russians, good evening, comrade. You've got us all. You've figured it out, my friend. No. No, it's not the Russians. It's not Russian bots. It's not political operatives that make up 50% of whatever the, the made up number is. This is the math. These are the numbers that you need to look at, is the actual gross of these films, and why episode 9 at this point, based on what we know, based on the trends, especially with Solo, it's not looking good at all for the future of Star Wars. But one more thing before I end for the day. So this was another thing that was pointed out to me by Joe, and it's truly amazing. So let's say, for example, you see, we have all these movies, and you know how Rotten Tomatoes usually works. You're able to put a name in. So let's say The Last Crusade. It's probably not even going to work now. Oh man, search is taking too long. That's not good. Why? Is it because of there being certain things in there? Is it because of certain words being a part of it? Let's say, let's do John Wick. How about this? John Wick. Oh, look at that. John Wick 2, John Wick 3. Again, nice order. Nice there. Let's put in Star Wars. Star Wars Saga. All right, we got, let's see, episode 2, episode 3, episode 4. Solo's up there. Rebels, Resistance, Clone Wars. Wait a minute. But Force Awakens is up there. Wait, where's The Last Jedi? Where's The Last Jedi? Hold on, let me put in The Last Jedi. So you saw how all those searches worked? Interesting. So I have to dig deeper just to find The Last Jedi. It didn't pop up when it first came up. It didn't do that. And what is this at? Oh, it's still at 45%. See, guys, this is the reason. This is the reason why Star Wars is not doing well. It's because audiences didn't like this film. It's the reason why there was a 70% drop from week 1 to week 2. It's the reason why this film made around 70% of its entire gross in the first 2 weeks before people found out about how bad it was. And it's the same reason why when we look at the math, once again, the numbers don't lie. Guys, let me know what you thought about this video in the comments below. I greatly appreciate it. If you like this video, hit that thumbs up, hit that subscribe. It really is important for us to get this message out there, because instead of people buying this nonsense, it was the Russians, oh my goodness, Rian Johnson's right, we need to get the actual truth out there. So guys, thank you so much for watching. Have a great day, and as always, God bless.